Hello, my name is Anderson, and welcome back to the Answers and More videos. Answers and More video is for those who already solved the quiz and reinforced the knowledge about what we learned from the previous videos. So, if you have not solved the quiz, go back to the website and solve the quiz first and come back to this video. Thank you very much. Okay. From the previous video giving advice part 2, we learned one of the phrases for giving advice. First one was should. The second was if I were you. And now we are covering If I Were You part 2 quiz. We're going to share the answers and we're going to analyze more. Okay, beforehand, let's quickly review what we learned from the previous video, part 2. So, if I were you. So we use if I were you when you give a piece of advice, imagining that you're in the same position as the person you're talking to. So, if I were Jack, if I were Jack. So, you're imagining that you're in the same position as Jack. So as you are in the same position as Jack, you're giving a best advice for Jack. If I were Jack, I would eat some food like this. Okay, then how do we form the sentence with if I were you, I would? We form the sentence like this. If I were the person you're talking to, Jack, as an example, and then you give an advice like I would give an advice. So if I were Jack, I would, which advice? Eat food. So, and we know that we can change the order. Yeah, like this. I would eat food if I were Jack, like this. Then how do we form the sentence with if I were, I would, with don't do it indication? So in that case, we add not. It's totally same, but we add not just to tell the person don't do it. So if I were Lisa, I would not eat biscuits. Like this. So we mention the person you're talking to. If I were Lisa, I would not eat biscuits. So like I'm in the same position as Lisa, and like not eating biscuit is the best for her. So we form sentence like this as adding not. Okay, very good. So from now on, let's go through the questions that you guys solved. Again, this video is for those who already solved the quiz. Okay, now let's move on. Number 1, let's read the question. select the correct advice of each question. So, this is the problem. Lisa eats a lot of biscuits. Then we should give an advice for her with the phrase, if I were, I would. Then let's select the correct advice for Lisa. So number 1, if I were Lisa, I would see a doctor. If I were Lisa, I would buy a car. If I were Lisa, I would quit eating biscuits. If I were Lisa, I would have an ice cream. Which would be the correct advice for Lisa? The correct answer is this. If I were Lisa, I would quit eating biscuits. So you imagine being a Lisa, and it is the best not to eat biscuits. So we say, if I were Lisa, the person who are listening, who are talking with you, and you give an advice, I would quit eating biscuits. So this is the advice, right? Good. So rest of the advice are a bit irrelevant to this problem. Okay, next one. Michael wants to go to university. This is the problem of him right now. Michael wants to go to university. Then which should be the correct advice for Michael? Number 1, I would study harder if I were Michael. Number 2, if I were Michael, I would not study hard. If I were Michael, I would eat breakfast. I would buy the ticket to Paris if I were Michael. Then which would be the correct advice for Michael right now? The answer is this. I would study harder if I were Michael. So if I were Michael, imagining you are Michael, in order to go to university, I would study harder if I were you. I would study harder if I were Michael. So, pinpoint when it comes to helping verb, auxiliary verb, molar verb, behind the verb stay with the base form. So, would study, not studies or studying, not like that. Just stay with the base form of verb. Okay, very good. Next one. Usman wants to be a singer in future. Usman wants to be a singer. Yeah. We have 4 advice here, and let's see. I would take a singing lesson if I were Usman. I would read a book if I were Usman. If I were Usman, I would drink water. If I were Usman, I would call my parents. Which would be the correct advice for Usman right now? Singing lesson, read a book, drink water, call my parents. The answer is singing lesson. The best and correct advice for Usman at the moment is singing lesson. So the answer is I would take a singing lesson if I were Usman. So you're imagining that you are Usman, and singing lesson would make you a singer much more faster than drink water or call Usman's parents or read a book. Singing lesson is the best advice for Usman at the moment right now. Very good. Now let's move on. So Brittany wants to go to Jordan for a holiday. Right? So which would be the correct advice for Brittany at the moment? Number 1, if I were Brittany, I would cook dinner. So if I were Brittany, I would book a flight. If I were Brittany, I would go to a cinema. Going to a cinema, right? I'll go to a cafe if I were Brittany. Going to cafe. Right? Very good. Brittany wants to go to Jordan as a travel. And which would be the correct advice for Brittany? The answer is would book a flight. would be a correct answer. Why? Booking a flight means buying a flight ticket, airplane ticket. So this answer, if I were Brittany, I would book a flight, would be the fastest and correct advice for Brittany at the moment. Very good. Let's move on. Rose wants to read book all day. So, which advice would be the best advice for Rose at the moment? Number one, if I were Rose, I would go to police station. If I Rose, I wouldn't go to a library, which means would not, right? If I Rose, I would go to a library. I would go to a supermarket if I were Rose. So which would be the correct advice for Rose at the moment? The answer is this one. I'll go to a library is the correct advice for Rose because Rose wants to read book. Okay? Wants to read a book is the right answer. If I were Rose, I'll go to a library is the correct advice. So next one. James wants to be healthy. James wants to be healthy. Then which advice would be a correct and good advice for Mr. James? So number one, I would go to a hospital if I were James. Going to a hospital is the advice for this. If I were James, I would drink more water. Drink more water. I would go to bed. Go to bed. I would not eat a hamburger. So which would be the correct advice for James? The answer is I would not eat a hamburger if I were James is the right answer. Very good. So let's move on. John can stop playing with his smartphone. So John can stop playing with his smartphone. So which would be the correct advice for John? Number one, if I were John, I would go to a restaurant. Going to a restaurant is the number one advice. Next one, I would eat a chocolate. That's the next advice. Number three, if I were John, I would stop using smartphone is the third advice. I would study English if I were John. That's the fourth advice. So among these, which would be the correct advice? What do you think? The answer is, if I were John, I would stop using the smartphone is the correct answer. Very good. Next one, Joseph has got a cold. So he's sick. Like this. So let's pick the correct advice for Mr. Joseph who has got cold. So if I were Joseph, I would exercise at a gym. This is the first advice. Exercise, it means working out at a gym. Next one, I would have a party. I would have a party if I were Joseph. So party, like drinking or having fun, like staying up all night. Very good advice. Next one, if I were Joseph, I would see a doctor. Seeing a doctor. That's the third one. Next one, if I were Joseph, I would eat Chinese food. That's the fourth one. So which would be the correct advice for Joseph at the moment? The answer is, if I were Joseph, I would see a doctor. See a doctor means going to hospital. Going to a hospital. So if you are sick or ill, so you need to go to the hospital and see your GP. And exercise and party and Chinese food is not relevant at this moment for Joseph. This is the correct advice. Very good. Let's move on to the next one. So Molly is hungry. So, and we have 4 advice for Molly, and let's see which one is correct. So number 1, I would study harder if I were Molly. I would study harder if I were Molly. That's the first one. I'll drink a cup of coffee if I were Molly. That's the second one. I would eat something if I were Molly. That's the third one. If I were Molly, I would travel to Japan. So Molly is hungry right now. Then which would be the correct advice for Molly? Study harder? Drink a cup of coffee? No, she's not thirsty. Eat something? Or travel to Japan? Which would be the correct advice for Molly? The answer is I would eat something if I were Molly is the correct answer. Very good. If I were Molly, you're imagining yourself being a Molly. Molly's hungry right now, and it's the best to eat something for Molly so right now. So you used I would eat something if for Molly. Excuse me. I would eat something if for Molly. You used this phrase for giving a piece of advice for Molly. Okay? Very good. So well done. Very good job. This is the end. And if you wanna study more, I prepared and I have uploaded a PDF file, a material for you guys, and please have a look. And I'll see you in the next class. Good job, well done. I'll see you in the next class. Stay safe and bye bye.